Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good day, as they say down under. We have a demographic that is international. Welcome everybody from all 12-step fellowships, or even no fellowship at all. Everybody's welcome. My name is Herb and I'm an alcoholic. Please join me in the set-aside prayer. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my unmanageability, the 12 steps, and you, for an open mind and a new experience with myself, my unmanageability, the 12 steps, and especially you. Please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Well, we're on step 4. We crossed over and you've been introduced to resentments. I've asked you to make a list of the people, institutions, and principles. This is specifically out of the big book. And to select between 10 and 20 of those that you will be doing some in-depth work on. I'm helping you shape the work. So number 1, it doesn't seem overwhelming and you can in fact schedule it and do it. And 2, from my own personal experience in doing the work, as well as my personal experience in running workshops for 25 years now, doing between 10 and 20, you're able to see the patterns. You're able to see the truth. You're able to delve deeply into the conscious beliefs and motives, as well as turning over the rocks to see the unconscious beliefs and motives. And doing any more than 10 or 20 merely becomes redundant. And some people may need that to confirm and to clarify. But from the workshop standpoint, we believe that that's sufficient to have an effective experience with it. Tonight, we're going to look at column 3. First, I want to take a look at the big book. So I'm going to stop the PowerPoint and come back to it in a minute. Where we left off on page 64 is completing that second step. Excuse me, that second column. At the very bottom of page 64, it says, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. I call that column 1 because that's the illustration on page 65. It's not named column 1, but there's a first and a second and a third column on the page. So I've named them so that I can refer to them easily so that you can direct your attention to them. You might even want to make a note in your book, as I've indicated. Column 1, column 2, column 3, right at the top of each of those respective 3 columns. Back to page 64. In most cases, and then number 2, we asked ourselves why we were angry, which is column 2. And notice in column 2, It's not cathartic. It's not emotional dump. It's not journaling. It's not therapy. No, it's just the facts. Look at page 64. An inventory that is fact-finding and fact-facing. Very succinct. His attention to my wife. 5 words. Told my wife of my mistress. 6 words. Brown may get my job at the office. 8 words. I don't have any rules, but I do want to use the big book as a model. Keep it simple, keep it straight, keep it short, keep it in succinct summary form. Why you're angry. If you need to write out paragraphs or pages, do it. It's great therapy. It's great catharsis. Do it on a separate worksheet and then summarize it this way. Very succinct form with the facts only. And I suggested that you give those a letter for future reference, A, B, C. So Mr. Brown would be number 1. That first sentence is A, the second sentence is B, and the third sentence, Brown may get my job at the office, is C. I'm being very mechanical with it because as we go forward, it can get complicated. And as you do your worksheets, if you choose to do that, if you don't number them properly, each one as you do it, and if you ever leave a pile or the cat or dog gets to it or somehow you drop it and it gets all messy, you won't be able to put it back together again because the patterns are so similar. I'm talking about column 3 and then column 4. And you'll be able to keep track of column 3 and column 4 because they will both have the designation 1A. They will both have the designation 1B. It just saves you a lot of grief. And I've learned this from experience. But let's get back to now the substance rather than the mechanics. On page 64, in most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, there's a key word. It's in the list on the 3rd column on page 65. In fact, there are 7 words there. I'm going to read and comment on 2 paragraphs. The 2 paragraphs are seemingly redundant, very unlike Bill in his literary style. In an interview I heard on tape, when somebody asked him the question about step 6 and 7, shortcomings and character defects, what are the differences? Bill just laughed and he said, oh, they're not different. I was taught in basic English not to use the same word in consecutive sentences. They're the same. Well, that applies here. So if Bill avoids redundancy, there must be a terrifically powerful reason for him to be semi-redundant. I'll make this comment in a couple places in the big book, because for me, it highlights Bill's desire for clarity and for emphasis, where he is somewhat redundant. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbook, that word's there, our ambitions, that word's on the 3rd column, our personal relations, that word's in the 3rd column, including sex, were hurt or threatened. Interesting verbs. You see, in the 12 and 12, he talks about, and the 12 and 12 was written 12, 13 years after the big book. Bill had a lot more psychological knowledge and sophistication. 1939, the big book was written. 1951, 53, somewhere in there, the 12 and 12 was published. He was under the mentorship, basically as a spiritual director, a Catholic priest, a Jesuit, Father Ed Dowling. He was a professor at St. Louis University, a Jesuit Catholic priest. Bill engaged him in 1940 when he met him as his spiritual director for the next 20 years. Well, the 12 and 12 is totally filled with references that Bill could never have gotten on his own. He got them from his education from this Jesuit Catholic priest, Father Ed Dowling. And he uses the term in step 4, instincts gone awry. Hurt or threaten. You see, these are survival reactions, as I've mentioned earlier. And in fact, in that PowerPoint presentation, I showed you the 7 capital sins that are used in the step 4 suggested in commentary in the 12 and 12. I don't make comment on that here. I don't use them in the step work because they're not in the big book. Bill learned about them later on. Hurt or threatened, my survival. Therefore, I have this reaction of anger. And I don't get over it. I keep it. I hold the anger. Maybe for a day, maybe for a week, maybe for a month, maybe for a year. Or in some cases, you'll find your own decades. At age 48, when I was doing this work, 48, I had a huge raging resentment. The number one in my life was my resentment toward my father. And he was already dead 10 years, 12 years. And I had done lots of therapeutic work around that. I had done the step work in my first year of sobriety, but I did it autobiographical, so I didn't get underneath the exact nature of the causes and conditions. And I got no relief. In this journey, the first time I used the big book to guide me through the steps, I had a step guide that unpacked it for me. So we were sore, he says. There's a synonym for resentment. We were burned up, another synonym. Now the second paragraph, which is close to redundant, not quite, a little variation on our grudge list. Column 1, grudge, synonym for resentment. We said opposite each name our injuries. Column 2. Was it our self-esteem? That word was already used. Our security, that's a new word. Our ambitions, that word was used. Our personal or sex relations. Oh, he's made 2 out of the 1 that are referred to in the first paragraph, which had been interfered with, a different verb. So we have verbs of hurt, threatened, or interfered with. You see, these are survival instincts coming out of threat. It might not be survival itself, but some aspect of maintaining our ego, our reputation, our power, our prestige. We were usually as definite as this example. I've gone to great lengths to talk about column 1 and 2, but today I want to talk about column 3. Well, there it is. Just a list of words. Notice, next to some of the words, he's listed fear. That wasn't in the 2 paragraphs. And it's not connected to every word. It's only connected at first to self-esteem. Later on, down in the column on page 65, it's connected to security. Curious. I'm a big book fundamentalist and literalist. I pay attention to the words. I pay attention to the suggestions. I pay attention to the interpretations and the meanings of words and the way it's laid out, because the way it's laid out is intentional. This isn't random. Bill created this matrix to teach us something. What was that? I really don't know. I've never heard a comment from him or anybody that talked to him about that. But the two men who took me through the work, the first time, unpacked for me column 4, which we haven't got to, but we will in a couple of weeks, but made very little reference to column 3 other than to match up those words with columns 1 and 2. It was like a checkbox exercise. This was the first time I was going through the work, so I didn't know that I didn't know, and I didn't know that he didn't know. I was doing what he asked me to do. I had no point of reference on this work. I got no benefit from doing a checkbox exercise. It was brainless, mindless, getting the task done to go on and move on forward. It didn't prevent me from having my first and major spiritual experience with column 4. That was life-changing for me. That was the very first time the curtains parted and I was able to see the light. I was able to see the truth. I didn't know it at the time. It was only in retrospect, as I look back, that I went, oh, that's when it happened. Because I didn't know that it was happening when it was happening. I was just head down doing the work, not having any perspective on it. But 3 years later, for different reasons, which I'll talk about later, not today, but some other time, I did the work again with another man, a mechanic with the big book, a very rigorous, righteous, fundamentalist, literalist. And he patiently took me through the third column. I hope you're hearing this, because I want you to know that it's a process, and I want you to know that I didn't get it the first time. In fact, I had a hard time getting it at all. Getting it, meaning understanding and applying and having experience with these two men's interpretation of this work. An interpretation. What I'm about to teach you, and I'm using that term advisedly, consciously. It's not in the big book. It's not even implied in the big book, other than the fact the words are there. But what do they mean, and what do we do with them? Those are logical questions. What do those words mean? I don't know what they meant to Bill. And what do we do with them? They're just standing there in column 3 without any suggestion as to what to do with them. Well, this man, the second time going through the work, 1991, it was 3 years after I'd had my first spiritual awakening, my first journey through the steps in 1988. And the dates are not important to you. What's important and why I emphasize them is to give you a sense of the progressive nature of this enlightenment, of this awakening. Yours may not be that long or prolonged, because I've had now an opportunity to have this experience and to collapse this experience into a common aggregated teaching. And we'll see what happens. You might notice in column 3 that there's a whole new word that wasn't in either of the two paragraphs. That very last line on the on page 65. Pride, he says. Well, that's not indicated in any of the paragraphs. And so that's the 7th word that we will use in the worksheet. We went back through our lives, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. We're going to stop there. Now we're going to take a look at some PowerPoints for me to give you a little preparation for the journey that we're going to take in this column 3 work. I hope it is as helpful to you as I want it to be. So one of the Russian philosophers, Gurdjieff, said that human beings are asleep, dreaming that they're awake. It's brilliant. Only brilliant now when I can look back when I'm awake, looking at 1984 when I was asleep, 1988 when I was asleep, doing this work that allowed me to wake up. Because I was able to take a look at the beliefs that I had. Notice it's in blue. That's very conscious, in contrast to the yellow of the lens. When I look through blue lenses, I see blue. My beliefs determine the lenses that I use. And when I look through the lenses of yellow, my perception is yellow, possibly delusional. In other words, a lie. When my perceptions are warped, my thoughts are warped. We can say demented. When my thoughts are demented, my feelings generated from my perceptions and my thoughts about my perceptions are dysfunctional. We call it diseased. Those feelings generate an attitude, which is total distortion about reality, because I've begun the dance looking through lenses that were warped, and now I'm many lenses removed from seeing reality as it is. I'm actually seeing reality as I am. I don't know that I don't know. I don't see that I don't see, because I'm looking through lenses that I'm used to, habituated. And my behavior is the habit that comes from all of this distortion. It's dysfunctional. I can't look at the naked beliefs that I have through the warped lens. The only way I can do this analytical work is to start at the bottom with behavior and to recognize that it's dysfunctional, and then take a look at the attitude that created that behavior to see that it's distorted, and then see the feelings that come from that to see that they're diseased, and then to take a look at the thoughts to see that they're demented, and then to take a look at the perception to see that it's delusional, and then to take a look at the lenses themselves through all of this analytical process to understand and experience my own beliefs. I don't know that I don't know, and I can't see the beliefs because my beliefs are the lenses through which I'm looking. And I don't see the lenses because they're the mechanism through which I'm looking. I hope that makes sense to you. It really helped me understand what Bill says. We're looking for the causes and conditions. We're looking for the exact nature. We're looking for the values. We're looking for the motives. This ego deflation at depth. We've talked about it before. We're going to peel it back, looking at our genetics, my story. My story includes my family culture, my emotional experiences, some of them traumatic, my psychological development from my emotional experiences and my education about it. We want to know what the truth is. What is the human value? Who am I at my core of existence? What indeed is my true self? Not the many masks that I wear, not the many personas that I dance to. We're going to look at column 3 from a brand new lens. That's why the set-aside attitude and the set-aside prayer is so important, because column 3, as I've interpreted it, will reveal to me my beliefs. What do I believe? I can't think it through. I can't feel it through. I can't read about it. But I can look at my feet, and my feet will reveal my beliefs because it will tell me who I am. My feet will tell me what my esteem is of myself. And we're not looking at self-esteem here, at least this is my interpretation of the word in the big book, as the psychological self-esteem, the therapeutic self-esteem that we talk about today in many contexts, high self-esteem or low self-esteem, healthy self-esteem or unhealthy self-esteem. No, that's not what we're talking about. Please see the word in the context of the big book. It has here its own unique definition. Who do I really believe that I am? Well, what do I believe about others? Who are they? Well, what do I believe about life? How should life be? What is my story? What is my philosophy? What is my theology? What is my psychology? What is my sociology? We're going to answer all, you are going to answer all those questions for yourself. Because you're going to look at your behavior in a variety of situations, and you're going to work through an analytical process I call the third column. Now, if you want to take a look at the format in the Way of Life document, I'm going to go through this now very carefully in an example that will model how I would encourage you to approach this third column. And if you don't have a third column worksheet with you, just use a piece of paper and make notes. Try to be clear. You're almost taking dictation from me so that you can use that then as a model to do your own unpacking of the third column with regard to your resentments. Now notice, it says at the top, before you begin, pray a version of the set-aside prayer. So every time you do this worksheet, you'll do a separate worksheet on 1A. You'll do a separate worksheet on 1B. You'll do a separate worksheet on 2A, 2B, 2C. I've recommended that you limit it to 10 to 20 individuals or institutions, and underneath each of those, limit it to 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. Limit it to that many reasons why you're angry, resentful. And so we would take one worksheet for 1A. We will take a separate worksheet for 1B. We will take a separate worksheet for 1C. Notice, if you did 20 individuals and you did 3 on every individual, 3 times 20 is 60. Well, you can already see how onerous that task would be. 60 of these worksheets. Once I broke the code and had some competence in filling it out and experiencing each of the worksheets, it took me about 15 minutes to do a worksheet. At the beginning, it took much longer, but once I got some facility with it, understanding what I was doing, 15 or 20 minutes. My experience also is that I could sit down and do 1, 2, or maximum 3, and I was just emotionally wrung out. I had to leave it, maybe to go and take a walk. I'd spent an hour doing those 3 worksheets, or maybe that was enough for the day. And then tomorrow I would do some more, or on the weekend I would do some more. I'm attempting to indicate to you, this is not a test to get correct. These are prompters to have an experience. And when you're thinking that deeply and experiencing that robustly, it's going to wear you out. but it's so totally worth it because freedom is on the other side of this information. Because right now we're puppets on a string. Hold that metaphor. We are puppets on a string, and the string is attached to people and circumstances, and people and circumstances determine how I feel. I don't, because they hold the strings. And when they pull the strings, I react. I am not empowered. I am powerless, in fact. So let's continue with the worksheet. When I resent Bob, those of you who have had exposure to me might be sighing, oh, not Bob again. But quite frankly, it's the only one I've ever done in 25 years because it represents my first breakthrough with doing these worksheets, and it changed my life. Bob was a coworker of mine. We were both officers of a company in Los Angeles. He had the same seniority as I did, about 20 years with the company. He was an officer of equal rank to me. We were responsible in different areas. We were colleagues and coworkers. We were on the same level from an authority standpoint and a responsibility standpoint. At that point, I was 4 years sober, which means I had, for 16 or 17 years, been a drinking alcoholic at that workplace. And he didn't understand sobriety. He didn't understand the nature of alcohol and alcoholism. It wasn't my job to explain that to him. I thought that I had changed sufficiently because I wasn't drinking, that he should let the past be bygones and let it go. And of course, that wasn't what he was wanting to do. He wanted to get me fired, and he put together a posse over 1 or 2 years. Quite frankly, it was a long process and a very painful process for me, where he essentially drove me out of the company by the end of 1988. Well, this work I began in February of 1988. So I was in the midst of my resentment toward Bob, which had culminated from years of his persecution of me. I resented Bob for trying to get me fired. Now, I might mention also, last week I indicated that at first, when the man who was taking me through the work asked me to list my resentments, I spent a week or two in prayer and meditation, and I went to him regularly and said, I don't have any resentments. I felt that I had done enough therapy. I was 4 years sober. I'm a pretty decent guy in my own estimation. In fact, I thought I was a Renaissance man. And he said, all right, let's do this work and see what the outcome is for you. And as I was praying and meditating about finding some resentments, because I wanted to do this work, I was dressing for work one day, and given the circumstances, I was dreading going into the office and seeing Bob. So this little movie went off in my head, about 30 seconds long, in which I walked into the office in my fictional movie, preparing to go to the office. And in the movie, I met Bob. I took a razor out of my pocket. I opened it, and I cut his stomach open, and his guts fell on the floor in this movie. And I woke up from it saying, oh, that's a resentment. I mean, it's pretty dramatic, but it's the truth of my experience. And once I got that first resentment, understanding connection with my emotions for the very first time, I got a floodgate of resentments, a list of probably 75 to 85 resentments. I had no problem after that. So Bob was a really important resentment for me, the one that opened the door. I resent Bob. That's my column 1 for trying to get me fired. For column 2, notice there's no story there. Bob for trying to get me fired. Now, I could spend hours telling you the story, but it's all story. It's not relevant here. The fact is, bottom line, I was angry because he was getting me fired, and I didn't feel it was justified. Did it hurt, threaten, or interfere? See, I'm using the verbs from the word from the big book. Self-esteem. All right, so pay attention now. My explanation is going to be critically important for you to be able to do this worksheet intelligently and have an experience with it. Self-esteem, as I mentioned earlier, is not about psychology. High self-esteem, low self-esteem. Look at the prompter there. These are definitions that the man who took me through the work gave me. They're not in the big book. They're not in the 12 and 12. They're not in any literature. This was this person, this step guide's personal experience and interpretation. Self-esteem. What is my deep belief about who I am? Notice, deep belief. I am is the prompter, and there's a small line there. It'll fit several words, but not several sentences. I am an extraordinary employee. I am an outstanding salesman. In fact, I'm the best employee in Los Angeles amongst all of my colleagues. And I'm the only one that should receive the promotion. Well, that's 4 short sentences, but that's my thought at the time, 1988. I was on a list of promotion candidates. I was one of 3. Bob wasn't on the list to run the office in Los Angeles in 1988. He didn't want to be, but he also didn't want me to run the office. I'm the best candidate to be manager of the Los Angeles office. That was my deep belief about who I am. Well, page 65 has fear next to each some of those, I call them variables. There's 7 of them. You can see the numbers on the left. Those are the words from the big book. The definitions are next to those words to give us some direction as to what to do with those words. This man said, let's put fear next to each one to see if it helps give you some information that you might not have had before. I am the best candidate to run the office. What is my fear? I may not be as good as I think I am. That was the very first time that I had ever allowed that thought, that fear, that feeling to come into my being. I was not a person who entertained emotions, let alone fear. So in the words on the worksheet, it says, it may be the opposite of my belief. This column was almost more important than the work on the left-hand side. I say almost because both columns were very important. Both works were very important. But when I looked at my fear, it gave me a deeper experience of the material on the left-hand side. Pride. Pride is not that capital sin that Bill refers to in the 12 and 12, or your dictionary would define in a different way. This man gave it a very unique definition. Please pay attention to it. This is why the set-aside attitude and the set-aside prayer is so important. Pride. How do I want other people to see me being treated by Bob? Oh, so this man then suggested a technique. Bill Wilson in the Big Book likes the drama theater analogy. So he said, create a stage in your imagination, put you and Bob on the stage. You're standing there facing Bob. And in the audience, in this show, in this movie theater, in this theater where there's a stage and you and Bob are on the stage, there's an audience. Put the co-workers in that audience. In this situation, that's the relevant audience. How do you want the co-workers in the audience to see Bob treating you? Well, I want them to see Bob treating me with respect, I said. Well, this man said, is that all you want? Well, no, I want deference in my imagination. He said, step outside the box, be creative. Don't be restricted by social mores, by personal doubt, by limitations of any kind. Stretch it, step way out, be outrageous, be outrageous, and see how it fits, stretch it. Well, I want, when I'm in my office and Bob walks in, I want him to stop at the door and pause and in a quiet whisper bow and ask, is it all right for me to enter your office? And when I say yes, he comes in and he makes a bow of homage to me. Now, if that sounds either funny or crazy, yeah, but in my stretch, I was attempting to get to the outer limits. Ambition. What do I want to happen? I want the job in the as head of the office. It's very straightforward. There's very little. Self-esteem and pride are a little difficult to get to directly, as I will spend a lot of time on that. Ambition is very straightforward. What do I want? I want to run the office. What's my fear? I won't get the job. There's no analysis there. It's just straightforward. Security, very different. What do I need? Not what do I want? And there's another question there. Why? I need to run the office, be the only authority in Los Angeles because I don't want anybody looking over my shoulder. My fear is I will have somebody in the office, authority, who will review and hold me accountable, and I won't measure up. I had never seen that level of lack of self-confidence. I was aware of something, and that's part of the reason I drank, to give me confidence, to make me feel at ease in social and public situations, but I had never focused on it or verbalized it. This was the very first time that I saw the truth of my sense of inadequacy. The persona, the mask, was beginning to crack. Personal relations. Again, it has its own unique definition. How do I expect this relationship should be? This is in the work environment. I believe that people should recognize talent that's obvious to me and should be kind and considerate and respectful. What is my fear? People in my office will disrespect me. This man asked me to push it a little farther. He said, so a meeting's been called, Herb. You're part of the meeting. You're not the head of the meeting, but you're part of the meeting. There's 10 of your colleagues going to be in the meeting. They all gathered earlier than you get there. You get there on time, which is your inclination always to be a little earlier or on time. And you walk into the room and it's filled with the 9 other people that are intended to be there. How do you want them to react to you when you walk in? Well, he said, stretch it. I want them to all stand and gasp and clutch their chest. Oh, he's here. I want the women to curtsy and the men to bow and to wait for me to say, you're welcome to sit down now. I'm not kidding. This was exactly what happened with this man and myself. And he just looked at me and he goes, oh, there's a little king down inside of you, isn't there? I came to see that it wasn't just a little king. It was the baby king that Freud talks about. Number 6, sex relations. This man said to me, I don't believe that Bill meant that to be sex as genital sex, because he's got the 3rd component of the step 4 inventory that's all about sex, genital sex. So perhaps let's explore your beliefs about gender. It has nothing to do with sex, genital sex. It has everything to do with gender. So we looked at, what is my belief about men in the workplace? What is my belief about women in the workplace? My belief about men in the workplace is we're colleagues, that we walk arm in arm to solve problems, to deal with challenges. We have each other's back. What is my fear? That they're all cutthroats and that they'll stab me in the back. And I intuitively knew that that was a projection of my own beliefs and systems of operating within the company. I was loyal only to me. I was always looking out for my best interest. I was always promoting myself. Now, I always have to, for 25 years, apologize to women in the audience, because this is literally who I was in 1988, 4 years sober. I thought I was a Renaissance man. And yet when I looked at this and did it with stretch, I said, the model ideal woman in the workplace is a second-class citizen. She's subordinate innately to men. She's there to provide our administration, to do the things that we don't want to do. And, oh, by the way, the attractive ones are available for mischief. Let's just keep it clean. I was just that classic chauvinist. I can't justify it by the culture or by the time. It was just who I was. I didn't know that. What is my fear? That women will embarrass me. Women will show me up to be the fraud that I am. First time I'd ever mouthed or thought those words. 7, pocketbook. It's about money, unless it's not. So it's about value. No one should interfere with my ability to make as much money and have as much power as possible. No one should be in my way. My fear? Everybody's in my way. Don't be overwhelmed if you have a sense of overwhelm. We're going to take this very slow. We're going to unpack it line by line in our workshop. Next week, I want you to focus on doing 3 of these worksheets. pay particular attention to the first two, self-esteem and pride, you'll see that they are flip sides of the same coin. In fact, if you have difficulty getting to the self-esteem because you can't look directly at it, go to the pride one. Put yourself on a stage with the person with whom you have a resentment. Have the audience there and ask yourself the question, how do you want the audience to see this person treating you? And write that out. And then take a look at that as revealing to you what your belief is about yourself. So for instance, some people will misinterpret the self-esteem and say, I am a piece of shit. My fear is that everybody will confirm that I'm a piece of shit. Well, you wouldn't have a resentment for somebody treating you like a piece of shit if, in fact, you were convinced that you were a piece of shit. You have a resentment because, in fact, you resist their comment that you're a piece of shit because you don't believe it for a minute. If, in fact, you really did believe you were a piece of shit, you would say they're particularly insightful. You wouldn't have any resentment at all. You would be congratulating them for their sense of intuition. You can use the pride to backdoor into self-esteem. In fact, once you've done the pride, a good way to check the accuracy of your self-esteem, the effectiveness of your self-esteem, there's no right or wrong. There's just what's a healthy way of looking at it, what's helpful to you to unpack the distorted lens of belief that you have, is to then take what you wrote in pride and reformat it into an answer for the self-esteem. I want them to see that I'm an outstanding person. Then I reformat that is in self-esteem. I am an outstanding person. It may not feel like it fits. Don't be concerned about your thoughts or feelings about it. Because in fact, you have a habitual way of looking at yourself. You have a habitual way of looking at other people. You have a habitual way of looking at the world. One of the clearest and simplest techniques for determining what you believe is hear yourself feel or say, should. I should. That reveals your belief. You should. That reveals your belief about other people. Life should. Employers should. Reality should. Fairness should. Loyalty should. All of those will reveal to you your beliefs. And then you can hold it up and say, is this a healthy belief? Then I will continue it. Or is this an unhealthy belief? And then I will challenge it. The whole point of this is not a right or wrong. The whole point of this is to get to the truth. What are the motives? What are the beliefs? What are the values? What are the facts? Keep in mind, we're looking at the lenses through which we're looking. But now we're looking at the lenses themselves. It takes some effort, it takes some prayer, it takes some practice, and it takes the feedback of experienced people. That's why we've indicated that we really recommend that you have a sponsor who's done this work or a step guide, in addition to your sponsor, a step guide, either individually or as a small group that you use as a sounding board to get some traction with regard to competency of breaking the code. That's my words for it, to break the code. This man gave me all these directions. I went home and I did 3, like I've asked you to. I came back and I read them to him, and he helped me. And I saw that I had about 50% of it that was helpful and accurate. He sent me home to do 3 more. I did 3 more. I came back. We went through it. I had it about 75%. He sent me home to do 3 more. I came back and I did about 100%. I had broken the code. And he said, now go home and call me once a week to report in on how you're doing and review 1 with me. So that he made sure I wasn't becoming complacent. I wasn't becoming lazy because I had broken the code. I was then potentially inclined to use a formula. Each one is separate. Each one is different. Even each one with the same person or the same institution can be different because it reveals another dimension of our delusion. Our beliefs are distorted. Our beliefs are a delusion. That means a lie. That means that we're taking actions based on a lie, and no wonder other people are hurt and we're not accomplishing what we had hoped for. There's a lot of suffering in you, and there's a lot of suffering in the people around you because you're operating in delusion. You're operating from a lie. You're taking actions that are not based on reality. But you don't know and you can't see until you can know and you can see. And that's what this is all about. So for next week, I want you to do a little bit more reading because I want to unpack pages 66 and 67 to you, assignment 13, which is all about how to deal with deep resentments. I'll talk more about it next week in terms of the background and the context and the meaning of it. I don't want to take the time today to do that. You'll have a much better ability to absorb my comments, my knowledge, and my experience next week after you've read it and pondered it, page 66 and page 67. Bill talks about deep resentment. He also talks about them. We're as powerless over our deep resentments as we are over alcohol. Check out page 66. He also says or implies that it's okay to put yourself on the resentment list. He says, and I think I can quote it, and then it was remorse and we were sore at ourselves. There's so much information and direction and helpful tool here in this material, about a page and a half, that allowed me to get free of the deep resentments. Oh, the analysis was important, but the prayer was the final effective action over time that removed those deep resentments so that I haven't had them since. No, you have to hear that. I haven't had those same deep resentments for over 32 years. And they had plagued me for 48. Amazing freedom. Assignment number 13. Items 1, 2. That'll be enough, actually. Yeah. Items 1 and 2 only. It's about reading that material. Then I'll unpack it next week and share some more personal experience with its effectiveness. All right, guys, you've been great. Introduced to a magic formula. I'm going to take you now to conclude with this prayer of magic, this transformation, this turning from the self-centeredness that Donna was talking about to the other-centeredness that is the promise of completing the 9th step. Lord, grant Make me a channel of your peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is about dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen. I probably said it before. I will probably say it again. But that last line reminds me of a line in Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, in which he says, the secret to life is to die before you die and realize there is no death. We have now entered for real in the death of the false self. And if you have resistance, it's because your ego is struggling to survive this process. So lean into it gently. Thanks, everybody.